parents are Egyptian immigrants to the United States. If I've got the math correctly, you would have been about 17 on 9/11. And I was thinking a little bit about you while I was watching Rami Youssef's new show about being the child of Egyptian immigrants, as I guess he would have been a little bit younger than you were. But and on September 11th, and I would just love to ask you a little bit about what that experience of being an Egyptian American Arab Muslim was like growing up, and then particularly against the backdrop of what 9/11 unleashed in the United States.
Yeah, Peter, I really appreciate the question. So, my parents were both immigrants from Egypt. My dad came to Detroit, Michigan in 1978 to pursue a PhD in engineering. He spent his career as an automotive engineer, both teaching engineering and also working for GM. And so, the auto industry is what brought us to Michigan. My parents got married, very quickly conceived a child, and then got divorced. And so, I was raised by my father, who is an immigrant, and my stepmom, Jackie, who's a daughter of the American Revolution from, we do this in Michigan. So Gratiot County, Michigan, which is the middle of the state of Michigan. Her family's been in this state since before the Civil War. And so I was raised in this house built by Muhammad and Jackie. And, to give you a sense of it, we're at the end of August now. And so, my childhood, right around now is when I would be coming back from Egypt to spend the final week of the summer in a cottage on a lake in Montcalm County called Crystal Lake. But that was after a whole summer, most of the summers of my formative years in Alexandria. And I would
Mm.
spend most of my time with my teta. So I had the smartest, wisest person I've ever met. She was the ninth of 14, never got to go to school. She raised six of the eight kids to whom she gave birth. Two died before their first birthdays. And so much of what I know about morals and values and principles, I learned at the feet of my grandmother, who never spent any time in an institution of any kind, a schoolhouse or a university, to say the least. And I'm really grateful for that in the sense that both I got to watch what my life should have been like, but for the accident of history of my getting to grow up in America and have a front row seat to that, and at the same time grow up with all the privileges of being vaccinated against diseases that killed an uncle I never got to meet, got to go to incredible public schools, an amazing public university at the University of Michigan, got my medical degree paid for by the National Institutes of Health. And those are opportunities my cousins never got to have. And so the question for me has always been, how do you give back? How do you create opportunity for folks who do not have it, given the incredible opportunities that I had? And so my upbringing really does form so much of who I am. And the amazing thing is, imagine having two grandmothers. One who is an illiterate woman of immense moral courage in Egypt, and one who is a trained nurse of also immense moral courage from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And imagine walking between these two grandmothers, knowing that these two people could not imagine the lives that one another lead, and I got to move seamlessly between them. And most people don't have the experience of having to explain one grandmother's life to the other, and
Mm.
it makes you really good at communicating and explaining yourself. Because wherever I went, I was always explaining myself. In Egypt, I was the American. In America, I was always known for my Egyptian heritage and in Muslim faith. And so it makes you really good at explaining yourself and understanding what somebody else understands about you. Now, 9/11, you're right. I was 17. I remember sitting in my chemistry class in the morning. I was a junior in high school and watching as we had just turned on the TV to watch the second plane hit the Twin Towers. And I played football in high school, wrestled and played lacrosse. And I remember we didn't play football the next week. But the week after that, I started to hear things directed at me I'd never heard before, right? I went from being an olive complexion kid with a funny name to being a very particular kind of olive complexion kid with a funny name. And, that hit home for us. My younger brother, my name is Abdurrahman, which has sounds that come out of parts of people's throats they don't know they have. And, you know, the, my parents wanted to do something a little bit easier for my brother, right? And he's 8 years younger than me. So they were like, here's a perfectly good name. This was 1992. Okay. Perfectly good name. It's Sam with O on the front and A on the back. Everybody's going to be able to pronounce it, except for his name was Osama. And I remember the courage of my little brother when they brought him home from school after 9/11. They said, we could just call you Sam. He said, no, my name is Osama and it's a beautiful name. And I don't want anybody else claim my
Mm.
name for me. And that was
Mm.
a lot of the way that we interacted. after 9/11, I became almost immensely clear about the fact that when people saw me, I was a stand-in for a whole group of people who they were taught to hate. And that was true whether I was in Egypt or I was in America. And I made it part of my responsibility almost to be very good at explaining and cutting through into the humanity that we all share and trying to recognize the things that we all love in the people we love. When your grandmother kisses you on the forehead, makes you your favorite meal, and tells you she loves you, is the same love, whether she's doing it in Arabic in a one-bedroom apartment in Alexandria or she's doing it in English in a bungalow in Michigan. So I've tried to lead with that, as I've come up. And in some respects, I don't really remember a time before, right? Because the consciousness that I have about my name and faith, so much of it was informed in the after. And when people are told that they cannot see eye to eye, that they cannot bridge divides, that folks are pitted in some sort of clash, and I know that that's not true because I lived in a home built in love by people who are supposedly on two sides of this. And I know that we can do better when we reach across these divides. So I appreciate the question. And sorry for the long-winded answer. It was a lot of life to cover there. So
No, 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 no. It's a beautiful answer, and especially resonant for me because my grandma was also born in Alexandria, Egypt, actually. Um,
wow.
yes,
I
before.
wonder, I wonder, I mean, because they would have been born in like the same era. Like it's an amazing thing to think that maybe your grandmother and my grandmother might have like passed each other one time in a fish market, which have been, yeah,
Yes, yes,
that gave
yes,
me
yes.
chills.
It's true. No, and I really regret never. I mean, my grandmother, she left as a teenager, but I always regret never having been able to never visit, or I mean, that I haven't visited. I could visit, um, but I mean, one of the things that really interests me about the story you're telling is I think that there aren't very many American politicians who have a life experience that allows them to see America from the outside. I think, obviously, there's a lot in what you said about your family story that reminded me of Barack Obama's story. Also, this kind of one very American family, and then one family that has outside the United States, or Zoran Mamdani's family. And I'm just curious. What spending all of that time in Egypt and then going back and forth between Egypt and the United States, what insight it gave you into the United States that has helped you think about this country because perhaps you could see it through the eyes of an Egyptian?
Hmm. I'll say a couple things. Number one, nobody loves America like somebody who understands what their life would have been like, but for America.
Mm,
And I'm both immensely grateful for what this country gave me and also in shock about what it too often denies too many other kids. And so for me, when I would go to Egypt, I didn't have the language for it at the time, but in the 15 hours that it would take me to go to Egypt, I'd cross about 10 years difference in life expectancy. And that hit me personally, right? I mean, took away an aunt and uncle I never got to meet. I didn't have to go 15 hours. I grew up in Oakland County, just north of the city of Detroit. I could go 15 minutes into the city and I could cross the same 10-year life expectancy gap. I'm a father, and I know that loving my daughters isn't just letting them be. Some days it's just letting them be, but loving them is creating the space and the opportunity for them to be their best. I love America like I love my daughters in the sense that I think it's crazy that in the richest, most powerful country in the world, there are still people who go without the basic means of a dignified life. And all of my career has been about trying to create the opportunities to address that gap out of love for what I know America can be, because it was that for me. The other part of it, though, is that the way that we move in the world, sometimes we miss what people see of us in the ways that when we are a colossus and when we swing our arms, it creates major impact for so many other people. And the conclusion that they sometimes draw from the fact that sometimes we don't pay attention to that, or worse, we take for granted the authority that comes with our size, I think forces folks to ask questions about like, why don't you care about me? And and I think the thing that I've learned as a child who was born and bred American, as American as it gets, captain my high school football team. Spending time abroad among my cousins who would say, why do they hate us? Is that I'd come home and then I'd talk to my other side of cousins and they'd say, why do they hate us?